Making it last is all I care to do. You loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last. Mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, friends forever, strengthening the ties that keep us together. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.
What is a knowledge and application of emotional intelligence important to the fostering of healthy relationships? Welcome to Making It Last podcast. I'm your host, Noreen Dealer. We're going to be talking with an emotional intelligence expert and author of the book Leadership Blessings from the Pub, Dr. Irvine Nugent. Welcome.
Thank you, Noreen.
Just in case somebody didn't catch the episode before when we explain what emotional intelligence is, just briefly just explain that before we get into the conversation this time around.
So emotional intelligence is the ability to be aware of what's happening inside, to have tools to regulate those emotions, to be aware of what's happening in other people around you, and to manage that in a relationship that has outcomes to benefit.
Thank you so much. All right, so let's take it in pieces. So why is a knowledge and application so important?
You know, at times I think we have discounted the power of our emotions. I work with many different people, and you get this thing. You said, "Okay, let's not get emotional here, and let's just get factual. Let's stick to that." And I always say, "I'm sorry, that's not how we are created as human beings. So we are created as emotional beings, and our emotions have great power, and our emotions are at the key of healthy and also impactful relationships." So if the objective is to have wonderful and healthy relationships, then our emotional life is at the center of that.
You said emotions have great power, and as you alluded to earlier, there's some people who think that you really shouldn't get emotional, especially in certain contexts. Let's say even in a workplace, because some people are saying, "No, I'm here to work. My emotions really don't need to come into all of this. I just need to get my work done."
Yeah.
So when you're saying that it has great power, and even thinking specifically about the workplace, for those people who think that, yes, I really don't want my emotions in this space, what is your reaction to that?
So I think very often when I hear this, I think of people who think of people having emotional outbursts, okay? And these are emotions perhaps that they feel a little uncomfortable with or out of control.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a couple of things going on here. One is we have a comfort level as regards people being emotional around us. And just because we feel emotional about someone showing great passion or joy or even a little bit of anger doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that it is. Secondly, I would just say as well is that we cannot divorce our emotions from the workplace. So when we want to make a decision, our emotions go into that. When we want to have a meeting and there is conflict, how we manage our conflict is emotional as well. And part of that is the ability to make sure, no emotion is good or bad. All our emotions are there to give us messages, and our emotions can be destructive or they can be constructive. And so it's this ability to use our emotions in the moment and to use them constructively. And that's what's important.
No, I zeroed in on the workplace itself, but let's think about other relationships. Yep. Emotions have great power.
Yeah.
Now, in a family setting, or even sometimes where you have to even think about the power dynamics.
Yeah.
How then do you say to maybe an offspring who, in their minds, usually the parent gets emotional, and they want to know how to better manage that? What sort of advice would you give to them so that they don't end up reacting?
Yeah. So I always like to start with, what's the outcome of this conversation you want to have? So I can understand. We when you live with people constantly believe me, we learn how to push each other's buttons. But ultimately, what we want to know is, what's the outcome I want? And for a parent with a child, very often, why perhaps they get frustrated, why they get angry, and you scratch below the surface. Really what you're uncovering is concern, deep concern about something, worry, or whatever. And so the point is, so what would the conversation look like if we got to a point where we were able to address that concern and reach an outcome? And very often, did my emotional outburst serve that? Probably not. And so therefore, what strategies might I use to have a better conversation, a more peaceful conversation? Say, for example, just give you, a little example. So often we get into a conflict, we're head to head.
Yes.
I would say to people, just go for a walk. The very physicality of being side by side changes a conversation. Yes. Sometimes we have really powerful conversations in the car. And if you look at that, it's because we're side by side and we're not facing each other. So just introduce different ways of having those conversations. And I think that initial question, what's the outcome I'm looking for?
I know you've been enjoying the conversation, but we're going to take a little break and get a word from our sponsor.
Photography is an art, but more so, photography must come from the heart. Precious moments, priceless times. Take a pic and know it will turn out fine. For beautiful captures, email us at bmcphotographyja@gmail.com or call us at 876-350-7089. BMC Photography JA. Beautiful moments captured.
We've touched workplace and we've touched a bit in terms of siblings. What about in terms of intimate relationships? Do you think the same applies or would it change slightly?
No, I think it does apply. When it comes to intimate relationships as well, I think, emotional intelligence is important because our emotional literacy, our emotional ability is different. And sometimes we're operating at different levels here. And to be able to understand patterns. We're creatures of habit and patterns. And I think, with our intimate partners, it's good to know what are some of the patterns here. So like, I know after they come home at work and it's been a bad day, I know that, probably a deep and loving conversation is not going to happen for the first half hour because they're annoyed or whatever. So it's knowing these patterns and to be able to manage the emotions that are involved here so that we're able to really give each other what we need.
You keep utilizing the term emotional literacy. Is it that it can be used interchangeably, or it's a totally different concept from being emotionally intelligent?
Emotional literacy really is on that first facet of self-awareness. So what people who are emotional, they're able to name what emotions they're going through and the intensity of those emotions. Very often people without, they'll say, well, how are you feeling? I'm angry. And then, well, what does that mean? I mean, are you explosive or are you just miffed? I'm annoyed. And the ability to kind of say, this is the strength of this emotion, et cetera. And that can really help the quality of the conversation and our response to the conversation.
You mentioned the whole idea of even, should I say, being open to different ways and in terms of just the outcome. But somebody might be listening and saying, it's all well and good to say all of these things. Yep. But when I'm in the heat of the moment, how practical is it, or how open will I be to just even trying to utilize different strategies and just changing how I deal with what is happening right this moment?
It's a great question. And when we are triggered, we go into, I'm going to use a technical term here called a refractory period. And basically what that means is when we're angry, the only thing we can hear and see is anything that backs up how we feel at the moment. Until we come out of that, we're not willing to hear other opinions. So it may well just be in the heat of the moment that the best thing we can say is, you know what? I need to call a timeout. This is going nowhere. It is not constructive. And let me cool down and recharge and think about that. I would just suggest that if we know that a conversation could get out of hand And if we know there's been a pattern here of that happening, then I think one of the things we can do is prepare for it better and prepare ourselves better. And I think then that's when it becomes easier to have the conversation.
What then do you do when, if it is that, especially in an intimate relationship, there is an imbalance? So while one person might think, oh, let's just step back and give this issue, sometime while we cool off, or the other was like, no, I want to talk about this right now. I need to get this off.
Yeah.
Of my headspace right now. How then do you strike that balance? Because at the end of the day, it's still emotions on either side.
Yeah. So I think there's I would have conversations about that. I would say, you know what, when you want, I can appreciate you want to vent, but when you vent, I get uncomfortable. I get uncomfortable with that. And here's why I feel uncomfortable. Would you be open to maybe exploring another way of doing that? Would you be open to kind of writing something down or whatever? So the point is, we want to avoid never having the conversation, but we want to have the conversation, but in a way which, and maybe, the person says, look, I'm venting. I don't mean it's just the way I do it. And now that I know that I'm making you feel uncomfortable, I'll try and be a little more cognizant of that. But it's this ability to be open to, there are many ways of having that conversation, and to make sure that both people are engaged in it.
Do you think that society, I'm just saying this generally because I'm sure across cultures might be different, do you think though that society encourages us to be expressive of our emotions?
No. I think we have a bias bias to words. We have a bias. I think we use this language, it's like, whenever there's a shooting, oh, he was a loner or she was a loner, but introversion has a stigma around it. And I think highly emotional people have a stigma around it. And so it's like we're taught mixed messages. So you can be emotional, but not, there's a line, this invisible line, oh, you're too emotional. So I think we do. I think we have, and I think people are a little ashamed as well about not really being aware of their emotions. And so I think there's a lot around emotions that are just not helpful in the messages we receive.
All right. And part of this conversation is to help with that. So what then can we do? We meaning wherever individuals are in their different spheres of influence. What then can be done to change all of that, to then heighten this whole idea of people being emotionally intelligent?
Well, let me just point one thing. The research is fascinating coming out of schools. When children are learned emotional literacy that I've talked about, when they've learned to check in, when they're allowed to explore the emotions and those emotions are honored, their ability to self-regulate increases dramatically. So I would just say, if I had power, I would begin and institute in every school some form of teaching around emotional intelligence and emotional regulation, because it impacts. And then just think, if you have that power as a child going into adulthood, it can change, all your relationships.
We'd ultimately have a better society. Because I do believe a lot of times that a lot of conflict, which then results in other things, whether fatal implications or otherwise, it's because sometimes people are just not able to express, or even have their emotions validated as they would want. So they find other ways.
Absolutely.
I know you've been enjoying the conversation, but we're going to take a little break and get a word from our sponsor.
Does your business lack branding? Having difficulty realizing your vision? Look no further. Splinth Brand Design Consultancy specializes in developing personal and business brands. Services include strategic management, website creation, social media branding, and more. Visit them online at www.wearesplint.com. Splinth, the brand you need to succeed.
As we're wrapping up this conversation, there's somebody who's listening there saying it's all well and good for both of you to talk about this, but I grew up, especially for males, I grew up feeling that if I was quite expressive, I would be seen as a sissy, or I'd be seen as a weak man. what is your encouragement, or what would you say to that young person listening to this, or even to a man who still feels that, guess what, I've been taught that that's not manly.
So I would just say, again, we're dealing with a lot of bias here of seeing that emotions are these out of control things, and they're
right.
It's kind of emotions is feminine, etc. Emotions are messages which help us communicate with other. And so if the goal is that you want a deeper relationship with another person, and again, you get to choose. You always get to choose how you display your emotions.
True.
But very often I find in males is that there is this lack of awareness. And I find very often the way I would approach it to males is when you fly off the handle, do you know when you say things that you later regret? How have you had a superpower that would just help you choose when you choose what reaction you have? Would you like that? And most people would say, absolutely, teach me how to do that. And that's really what we're giving people choice.
What is one tip then you'd give to males in terms of a strategy or a tip that they can then try to apply to get them on the path of being emotionally intelligent if they're not already there?
Let me give someone an exercise I from work to home and home to work. If before you walk into the job or you walk into home, spend a minute in the bus, in the car, wherever you are, or even at home if you're moving back and forth, and just reflect, what am I bringing in to this place? What's just happened? Am I angry? Am I coming off a conversation that's just, I'm in a foul mood? And how would I like to show up here? What do I need to adjust? And just that simple threshold reflection can really change how you show up.
I'm thinking about, I said, I've been pretty biased and picking on the males. So as we're wrapping up, let's say something for the females, because sometimes it is that we're seen as the emotional creatures, and sometimes men probably tune us out when they think that we're just being emotional about an issue. So what then would you say to females for us to better manage how we express those emotions?
So again, I would just say that, again, there's a lot of bias towards females, because then it's then the message to females is don't be emotional. And and you need to be more male. If you were just like the man, you'd be fine. And I just think, no, your emotions again are a gift, and you get to choose how you show them. And so you may well, as a woman, want to maybe adjust and show up a little bit differently in a conversation, etc. But it's that power of choice that really is essential.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, Irvine.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. This was Making It Last podcast, where it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, but with other people. I'm Noreen Daly. Until next time.
Making it last is all I care to do. You loving me, I loving you. Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives,